Hello and a very warm welcome to all the viewers of Detox. That is Disruptive Literacy Talks. And this is Tanmay Prakash, your host of the session. Detox aims at coming together in eradicating illiteracy and focusing upon the foundational literacy and numeracy. Detox is an initiative of Global Dream, a disruptive movement for universal foundational literacy and numeracy. It was launched in the year 2014 by Dr. Sunita Gandhi, educationist and the former economist at the World Bank. By using disruptive and research based methods and processes, Global Dream aims to come together in making 100% literate India in a time bound mission. And moreover, we believe in disrupting the status quo when best is not the enough. Moving on to today's session. With this, I would like to introduce you with the speaker of the session, Mr. John Corripo, co-author, the Eduprotocol Field Guidebook 1 and 2, Eduprotocols Math Edition, who will be speaking upon the topic introducing Eduprotocol as an instrument for creating foundational learning. Mr. John describes himself as a formerly disgruntled student. He made it almost all the way through school with a 2.9 GPA. His final 3 semesters in advertising changed everything. Though advertising classes were project based, John's grade shot to nearly 4.0. 20 years later, John had served a decade at K8 level, opened a one-to-one PBL Google-based high school, served in 2 county offices, including as an assistant superintendent and an IT director. John has been recognized as the County Teacher of the Year, a 20 to watch educator by the NSBA, and was top 100 influencer in 2019 EdTech Digest Awards and a 2020 EdTech Digest Awards Trendsetter winner. John has served as the Chief Learning Officer at CUE for over a half of a decade, leading the training over 60,000 educators in the last 5 years. John has also the co-author of the Eduprotocol Field Guide Book 1 and 2 and assisted the new Eduprotocols Math Edition. We at Detox are glad to have Mr. John with us. Welcome, sir. Welcome to Detox.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
And sir, your journey has been very interesting while I was reading about you. And it would be an honor if you could tell about yourself and your work more to us, because what we know is that what we have read, but you can share from your experiences as well.
Well, great. Do you want me to switch to the slides now?
Sure, sir.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, my name is John Corripo. There's my email address. I love to share educationally. I love to share with teachers. So my email address is jcorripo@gmail. And if you're on Twitter, which frankly, if you're an educator nowadays, you should be, my Twitter handle is @jcorripo. And like you mentioned earlier, I have about 25 years in education in the United States. I've been a teacher, a technology director, a principal, and an assistant superintendent. And there's my background. I live near Yosemite National Park, so I'm just throwing it out there. If any of you come to the U.S., drop me an email, and I would love to give you a personal tour of one of the most amazing places on the earth there in Yosemite. And so you've heard the word Eduprotocol, and we've got the 3 books. And I'm not here to sell you books. I'm here to talk about teaching better and working less. And I think this fits wonderfully with the detox mission and theme of increasing literacy in India. You see, in the United States, sometimes teachers work very, very hard and students don't work very, very hard. And what happens is grades don't go up, and it can become very demoralizing. And if you're looking to make your educational success more prolific and not have to work Saturdays and Sundays to be able to get there, the Eduprotocol perspective is a great way to do it. A little bit about Eduprotocols. They're research-based. So if you read John Hattie or Marzano, Ken Robinson, and even Sugata Mitra, who I've been happy enough to meet in the past, that the Eduprotocols approach is very much based on research of folks like that. And Eduprotocols are a pedagogical approach, not a curriculum. So if you're a teacher that already has a curriculum, Eduprotocols are a fresh way to accomplish your academic goals. And in the US, we have two terms, which I'm not sure if are as common in India. We have one called SEL, which is social emotional learning, which is being aware of the well-being of the learner and how they're feeling about themselves, in addition to strictly an academic approach. And then UDL is another concept here in the United States called Universal Design for Learning. And the easiest way I can explain that is when you buy your smartphone, right? When you buy a smartphone, does it come with 200-page manual? It does not. The smartphone has little things like plus signs and arrows and throbbers and things that move so that you can intuitively figure out how to use it. And my interpretation of a UDL is that we make the work accessible to all students, regardless of their academic background or skill set. We're giving them the ability to practice at a high quality. So I'm going to share a couple of anecdotes and some research, and then I think we're going to go to kind of a Q&A format with like a panel of us asking questions. So I just want to share a few here quick anecdotes about how I got to this approach. And I think it's very important in teaching that we understand, if you look at the slide, a list of items that you go to the market and get. If you're just getting a list of items does not mean that bringing those home, that I'm going to cook that meal as well as my grandma. My grandma has skills in the kitchen that I do not have, and she can make meals with just a bare minimum of ingredients that are far better than anything I ever make. Another example of that would be in education. Sometimes we're very, very focused on the book or the worksheets or things like that. And the fact of the matter is that just having the right workbook is not going to produce students who are highly engaged, highly literate for a 21st century world, and are ready to strike out in our respective economies and be economically successful. So that's just a little analogy I want to make there. Just a list of items does not mean that a person is going to have a result of activity that's high quality. Now, I mentioned Michael Fullen earlier. He's a pretty famous researcher in the U.S., and he was at a talk. I got to sit about 10 feet from him and hear him say these words. The biggest crisis in education right now is an over reliance on corporately produced lesson plans. And what he means by that is, especially in the US, that teachers, if we take away the teacher's addition, if we take away the books and the curriculum, that the teacher will be left with an inability to get the academic work done that they desire. And we strongly believe that the pedagogical approach is the most important thing that a teacher can have. And I got to meet Sagata Mitra here in the US one time, and his work is pretty non-traditional. I know you guys talk in the detox about a fresh take on things, and Sagata doesn't make everybody happy, but I do 100% agree with his statement here that knowing things is not the most important thing in a 21st century society and economy. Being able to find out is the most important thing, and that sense of inquisitiveness is a very critical item. Now, this is from a book called What School Could Be by an author named Ted Dintersmith. And if you look very carefully here, I'll move my little arrow around. These are reading, math, and science scores in the United States since 1970. They have not gone up. This is reading, math, and science in the US since 1970. I'm 57 years old. In 1970, I was in first grade. And as a nation, we're not really getting better. The kids that are going to learn to read, and the kids that are going to struggle, keep struggling. And just for the fun of it, this line right here, That line is the cost of school. So the cost of school is going up dramatically, but the results are not. I'm fortunate to know another gentleman by the name of Dr. Sunny Magana. His research is housed at the University of Oxford. And Sunny's research shows that when you use EdTech without changing your pedagogical approach, it has a 0.34 effect on learning. And you might say, well, what's a 0.34 effect on learning mean? Well, a regular year of education uh, is about a 0.40. So when students and teachers aren't using ed technology correctly, they're actually underperforming. They're growing less than they would have. Whereas with students where we're using Eduprotocols, this is a true set of data here from the United States. A first year teacher has inherited a class that 16% of their class are on grade level according to the California test. 4 months later, 55% of her students have exceeded or met the state standards. I really want to let that sink in for a second. Her scores quadrupled in a little more than 4 months. I think that's the kind of thing you guys are talking about here, the detox. Here's another friend of mine. His students went up 41 points and 50 points on the California standardized test. Now, I don't know about in India, but in California, most school districts would be thrilled to go up 4, 5, 8 points. These kids are going up 41 points. They're almost doubling their score in 1 year. And so now moving into the protocols themselves, this is the way that we traditionally teach. This is what I always got as a student. The teacher enters the room, they give their lecture. That's the direct instruction. The students get a worksheet or a task to complete. At the end of the class, they turn it in, and then the teacher will grade it later. And later could be between 3 days and never. The student may never get feedback. And this is what I got all the way through school. Whereas in the Eduprotocols approach, we start with work. We ask the students a question, we find out what they can do. If they can't get it right, we use a little bit of feedback, and then we give them some direct instruction to make sure they know what the task is. And then we go to work again. So it's not, and that's why it says at the top, it's not a rebuild of the teacher's skills. It's a remix. It's changing the order, and so that we get the result that we're looking for. Eduprotocols are frames that can be used daily, weekly, all year long. Imagine using the same basic lesson plan every day for 5, 6, 7 days. Student performance dramatically improves because the teachers are giving feedback in real time. The teachers are containing 8 or 9 different standards in a singular lesson instead of doing one at a time. I don't know about in India, but in the United States, there's a group of teachers that does lesson 1.2, followed by 1.3, followed by 1.4. For the students, it's really hard for them to get a sense of cohesion with all those different things. Eduprotocols work wonderfully on paper, fabulously on paper. Technology works. You can use cell phones to do these. Eduprotocols work with nearly all grade levels and ranges, including adult learners. And here's a couple more quick things, and then I'm going to share one with you guys, and then we can kind of talk about this. This is a thing called the forgetting curve, and it's very popular in marketing and advertising, and in what's the other one? Marketing, advertising. Oh, and in sports. So imagine that you have a scenario where the student does a task on day one. By day four, by day four, their retention of that task is pretty low if you look at the arrow there. If you do the task again on day two, look what the retention level is now. And if you repeat on day 3 and day 4, the student retention level is now up here in the 80 or 90th percentile. And the problem is that the way we do normally do school is that the students get to see things one time or two times. They may not get feedback. We're not giving them enough repetitions. So here's a couple of teacher friends of mine who've been using Eduprotocols with their classes. and they've testified to this on Twitter. Um, in my 20 years of teaching, nothing has impacted my practice more. And Will jumps in and says, this has completely shifted how I think about lesson planning, delivery, and engagement. And at the university level, my friend Joe Marquez shared this at Fresno State University with some prospective teachers. One of the comments was, I learned more in 3 hours than I did in 6 years of college. So, yeah, today was a good day. And then finally, my friend Diane says that she's been teaching for 30 years the exact same way, and that Eduprotocols are changing her life. Like, she's excited to go to school every day, and her students love it, and they're more engaged than they've ever been. So, to my detox friends, this is one of the first Eduprotocols that we ever used. And the way that it goes is like this. If you teach the parts of speech, especially for English, there are 8 parts of speech. And typically in the US, they teach one per day. I'm sorry, one per week. 1 week is nouns, 1 week is verbs, 1 week is adjectives, 1 week is prepositions. You get the idea. The problem with that is what's happening is you're actually overwriting the student's short term memory. See, the human brain can only store so much in their short term memory. And what happens is you go for a week of nouns, and the students might have only gotten feedback 2 or 3 times, and then there's a test, and that information's still in their short-term memory. You haven't done enough repetitions to lock it into their long-term memory. Remember my forgetting curve thing here. So what we do in 8 parts is we make this graphic organizer, and these are free, by the way. You use all 8 parts of speech every day with a very, very funny picture, and I'll show you a picture in a moment. Imagine that for the teacher, the only preparation for tomorrow is to have another funny picture. If you've seen the internet lately, there are plenty of funny pictures. In fact, nowadays we use memes and GIFs for this. But every day the students do the 8 parts of speech and then write a little paragraph. Here's an exemplar of a student bit here from Katharina Mendez, crying and laughing over this student's 8 parts. We still have work to do, but this fourth grader's voice is loud and clear, always a surprise and a joy to read through their work. And if you look here on the right, here's the picture that the student wrote about. And this is the funny picture part that makes it engaging for adults and students. They're doing a thing in the United States called dabbing, which is a little move that an athlete makes after scoring a goal or making a point in a cricket game or something like that. Look how much this student wrote here in a very limited amount of time. Typically, we spend about 15 or 20 minutes a day on the 8 parts of speech. So I'm going to go on a little blast right here, and then I'll stop sharing my screen. We have an activity called Thin Slides that's fabulous for vocabulary. One picture, one word, 3 minutes, and then share a claim or an observation. Sketch and tell. Watch a video or learn a process like osmosis or slip, strike, fault, earthquakes, or tsunamis, and then explain by writing and explain by drawing. The Fast and Curious, we use tools like Kahoot and quizzes, but what we do differently is we give the students the quiz with no preparation. We coach them based on their results and scores, and then we give the quiz again. We routinely see students grow 40% in 15 minutes using that method. We have the cyber sandwich. It's similar to the old think, pair, share if they have that in India. 2 students, 5 slides. Both students read an article and then they complete a Venn diagram about what their findings are. The teacher has a Socratic seminar, and the students write a quick paragraph to finish it up. And like I said earlier, magnificent on paper. It's just more fun with Google Drawing and Google Docs or Microsoft. We use the Freyr model a lot, which is a classic. You can just Google Freyr model. It's one of the most effective ways to raise student comprehension. It's also fun and easy. We have Bokakucha, which is similar to Pechakucha, if you're familiar with that. Imagine 3 minutes for students to talk about one key skill or concept. So read a passage. What are 3 facts about the main character? Read a passage. What are 3 facts about the antagonist? Read a passage. What are 3 facts about the setting? or the plot. And so students get 3 facts, they get about 3 minutes to build the slide, and then they present in small groups. And then that's a newer one that we've got called the Plotline Planner, which is all the pieces of a story arc. But what we have the students do is we learn those through watching TV commercials and short videos on YouTube to gain the academic knowledge. And then what happens is we transfer them over to text. So it's a really neat process. If you guys like these, you can get free templates at eduprotocols.com. And you just click on the link there, eduprotocols.com. We have books. I am not here to sell you books, my friends. I'm here to help you teach better. And I'm excited to add India to the list. We've just gotten going in Mexico and Brazil as well. And I'll put this. I think it's in the bottom there. My Twitter handle at jcarippo, and then my email address is jcarippo@gmail.com. I am more than happy to share all of these things for no charge. Just shoot me an email, and I'm happy to share. So that wraps it up, you guys. Let's talk. Let's ask. I love the interaction. Let's have some questions.
So, sir, firstly, it was a very nice presentation. It was the presentation gave us more views about you and your work, and how the education can now be made much interesting, because when we make the education or the literacy interesting, the
Mm-hmm.
learner takes more part in it.
Right. And like I shared that picture of my grandma. Your grandma is very smart about getting you interested in what the task is. And your grandma tricks you into thinking it's your task, not her task, right? And that's what I seek to do as a teacher, is to be, and I got that idea from Sugata Mitra. He says if you give kids technology, you don't have to show them everything. What you have to do is ask them questions like, what else can you do with it? And they're more than happy to learn it for you. So I very much agree with that idea.
Yes, sir. And when we are talking about making the education more interesting, do you feel that lack of motivation challenge among the teachers are some of the teacher developmental problems?
Well, I mentioned this in the slides. Here's what I think is going on. Um, Outside of school, kids can learn on YouTube or TikTok. They can Google it. Inside of school, the teachers think that we have to tell the kids everything before they learn, right? So in our head, there's this storyline that we have to teach them everything. And the kids are thinking, I could have just looked this up at Wikipedia. And so I think meshing those two things is really critical, which is why we talk so much about pedagogy. The belief that I have to stand in front of the class and tell the students all the facts before they can learn is turning out to be not true. And that was the Sugata Mitra quote, right? It's more important for students to be able to find things than it is for them to simply memorize things. And that was one of the templates that I mentioned, the thin slide. So, Tanmay, what subject do you teach? What's your favorite subject?
I don't teach, but yes, my favorite subject is somewhere revolving about around communication.
Okay, so would you rather have me just talk to you about communication or ask you questions about communication and let you find me the best things on the internet? For example, hey guys, what's a pechakucha? Ready, go. And the students can look it up and they can say, oh my gosh, it's this super cool Asian game where people make PowerPoints for fun to talk each other into ideas. Wow, that's really cool. Would you like to try that in class? And if you like communication, you probably go, yeah, this would be great. That can happen in 10 minutes. Whereas if I spend my whole weekend making PowerPoints about what Pechakucha is, and then I do a lecture for 45 minutes and tell you to answer the 8 questions to prove that you listened, I'm not sure you're going to learn as much in that model. And that's the classic model, right?
Yes, and I feel that if we let the learners search things, they would get more sense of confidence in them, and they can learn more easily. Because
Yes.
when we tell them to learn something, So they like start themselves indulging into it.
Right, right. And then they actually think about it besides their time in class, right? They're researching it beyond the time. Another classic example that I think that teachers make is with vocabulary words, right? Here's the list of words you need to learn. And what we traditionally do with that is we give the kids the list, and then we make them copy them out of the dictionary. We make them write sentences. We make them fill in the blanks. We make them do a PDF. We make them do a worksheet. Whereas there's tools now like Kahoot. Have you seen Kahoot at all, Tanmay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So there's many tools like Kahoot. Some of my favorites include Quizzes and Gimkit and Quizlet. So the way I do it in my class now, if you were in my class and you came to class on Monday, we would start with the test. I would give you the test. And you know what? You'd probably be able to get 30 or 40% right. And then I would coach you on the 8 or 9 that you missed, and then I would give you the test immediately again. And guess what would happen? Your score would go up 25 or 30% because you were getting immediate feedback. May guess what we would do tomorrow? The exact
Sorry.
same thing. The exact same thing. And guess what
Hmm.
we do Wednesday? The exact same thing. And guess what we do Thursday? The exact same thing. Until the entire class is passing. And this is the teach better, work less part. I don't have to grade any papers tonight, but I know exactly which ones you do and don't know for tomorrow. You don't have to do any creepy homework tonight. You can just enjoy being a human kid and have a great evening. You like me more. You think I'm cool because your grades are going up. That's that whole approach that's very different than you study your homework. Your evening is ruined. My weekend's ruined grading, and not that many kids pass, and everybody's frustrated. That's that little subtle shift that we're talking about.
Yes, so basically making the education interesting and learner friendly is the basic motto.
Right. And I'm not sacrificing academics. My students work harder than regular students because they're working the whole class. My students rarely sit and listen. They are working, they are working. I'm giving feedback. They're working some more. I'm giving feedback. For one example, Tanmay, on my students, the final Latin roots quiz of the year, and I think you can agree, Latin roots are pretty important in English. Um, there were 65 words and I had 22 students. Over the last 3 days, my students did almost 3,000 responses with a 94% success rate. I'm going to say that they're doing just fine. And 9,000 questions by 22 kids. That's a lot. But their success rate was 94% because of the way we practice.
Yes, sir. And sir, like you told us that the core concept of concept of Edu protocol can be narrowed down to not working harder,
Mhm.
but working smarter. So how
Yes.
this concept can be applied into the developing countries?
Well, the best thing is that a lot of times in developing countries, to have a school, the first thing we need is a very expensive curriculum. Books are very expensive. Shipping books sometimes cost more than the books themselves. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
So, if you wanted to use Chromebooks or iPads, you could have one Chromebook would cost you the same price as 5 textbooks. So it's remarkably more affordable. The other piece is that the Eduprotocols that I shared, they're all free. You can go on Twitter and you can ask people, I need one for math. There's a variation because I know you guys are into literacy. There's a variation called Math Reps. If you go to mathreps.com, those are all free. It's a K-12 program that's ready to go. So I would say in a developing country, and that's part of what's going on with us in Mexico and Brazil, it's a lot more affordable. If you have a Chromebook, you have almost everything you need. If you do not have a Chromebook, the 8 parts thing that I showed you, the Math Reps, works great on paper. Not a problem. I think you're muted.
I'm sorry. Am I
There you
able?
go.
Are you able to
Now
hear
you're
me, sir?
back. Yeah, I got you back.
Okay. Yes, sir. So as we know that the world is right now dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, and there is a new term involved that is known as the new normal. So how do you think that how can Edu Protocol can be the new normal in the field of education, in the field of literacy after the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, I think two of my favorite things about what COVID did to education, even though clearly COVID was not, a positive event, but COVID forced teachers who were teaching remotely to think about how the students felt, or the students' cameras would do this, right? They would go off. If you want your students to be engaged, you have to be engaged with them as people, and that's my favorite thing that talked about um, on COVID is that teachers now started thinking about interacting with kids. The other thing that I think that COVID affected as the new normal is a lot more teachers are comfortable with a lot more technology. It's not everybody, but before COVID, I would say in the US, maybe 5% of teachers would have been comfortable with Zoom. Now we're 50 or 60% comfortable with Zoom, which is not everybody, but it's a lot better. So those are my two big takeaways: being more mindful of the student, and then being more comfortable with change and technology.
Yes, sir. And as you said about Zoom, so before the COVID-19 pandemic, most of the people didn't knew even about there is a thing known as
Exactly.
Zoom.
Didn't even
The
know there was a
school
Zoom.
going kids, yeah, exactly. For many of them Zoom didn't existed also before the COVID-19 pandemic, like the school going kids who are now like uh, quite often like they are interested in Zoom meetings, like now they are doing their birthday parties and small events on Zoom also.
Right, right.
So yeah, so I
I
think
think that there will in the US, again, I don't know as much in India, but in the US used to be either a kid who went to school, or there was a group called independent study or homeschool that they learned from home. I think there's going to be a new group, and I think they're going to choose to be kind of Zoom students all the time because they get to use their own bathroom, they get to eat their own lunch, they don't have to sit in an uncomfortable desk, and they can learn on their own terms. And I think getting those kids to sit in a classroom for 6 hours and just listen to people talk, I think it's going to be hard.
yes,
Is
sir.
it
And
is it
as
time to
yeah,
bring in the doctor?
we'll be bringing Dr. Sunita Gandhi with us in this session as a discussant. Uh, welcome, ma'am. Welcome to Detox.
Hi, John.
Good
Lovely to have
morning.
you on our Talks. A very good morning to you.
Oh, good morning
Wonderful.
to you as well. Did you like what I shared? Was it helping to clarify the Eduprotocols approach?
I think it is absolutely mind-boggling, and it's so. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. So
Right.
if the kids are doing 94% of 9,000 questions, and how many? Just a small group of kids. It's just absolutely. I think 900 kids. You said no. How many was
Tw-
it?
20 kids,
Why do you
9,000
think 9,000
questions.
questions and 94%? My God, I mean, this is like totally, it's got to be top class, world
Yeah.
class record. And I think that, it needs to be looked into because we are so constrained by our thought processes.
Hmm.
We think so much according to how we were taught, and our limited notions. We find some little truth someplace, and we get so attracted
Yep.
to it. We try it out. We get really good results, and we are like satisfied. But I think we need to be not satisfied till all our kids are doing well, till all they
I
have a
agree.
life. As the kids need to have a life. And there's so many neat, clean ways you can teach right now that you don't need to worry about the old. I think Tanmay is going to show you a methodology we are using for flip teaching. If not flip teaching, it's actually reverse methodology for teaching language numeracy to the underprivileged children.
I
And
would love to see it.
it's so much faster. I mean, in a school, it takes 3 years for them to learn the Hindi, how to read Hindi,
Right.
and do numeracy at grade three level, and this can do it in 30 hours. So that's using a reverse methodology, and
Yeah, and I
it's
think I think we're going to see a lot of similarities because you probably don't have 2 hours of lecture a day to teach the kids Hindi in 30 hours.
Yeah, it's probably absolutely right. I'll try and open it up. I think Tanmay will. Tanmay, you want to open it up now? You're back. So
Yes, ma'am.
can you share that very quickly, because it'll give John an idea about what we're talking about.
So, sir, this is our Global Dream Literacy Toolkit, which is one of the literacy material. So, this book is in English. So, basically, to teach a learner or make a learner literate, one should not be a specific teacher. Uh, that can be a school going kid who can teach the underprivileged adults as well as the out of the school children. So, basically, we work for the underprivileged adults and the out of the school children
Okay.
for their literacy. So we have a pre-test in this, sir, where we get to know the current and the existing knowledge of the learner, that how much he or she knows about the things. So after that, we introduce him or her, the learner, basically with this toolkit, where we use the pictorial representations and the power of phonic. So you can see in the book, in the image, that there are three images formed on the left corner, top left corner. That is, one is of violin, the other one is of apple, and the third one is nest. So what now we do is that we ask the learner to just tell us the first sound of violin. So
Right.
we don't go A for apple, B for ball. We try to ask them that what is the first sound of violin. So he will break the word violin into three parts: violin. Now he will tell that the first sound of violin is v. And then what we do is, like as you said, sir, the teacher is much excited to tell the answers to the learners before they could answer. If they are not able to answer, the teacher could like just go and tell the answer. So what we do is that we have a method that ask, wait, and don't tell. Like ask the learner that what does it mean, wait for him to answer, and do not tell. Let him try to answer the figure out the
Hmm.
answer.
I love it.
So yes, sir. And now
Productive
we'll ask
struggle.
him. Yes, sir.
Sorry,
Productive struggle. Which
productive struggle. Yeah, yeah.
So productive struggle will build a sense of confidence in him, in the learner. And now moving on, we will ask the learner that what you can see in the second image. So he will say that I can see the photograph of an apple. So we'll say that just tell us the what is the first sound of apple. So he will say that the first sound of
Ah,
apple is eh. And now we'll ask that what is the first sound of nest. So he will say no. So now we'll tell them that you have basically three sounds: v, a, and n. So now just mix them and tell what word comes out of it. So
mhm.
he'll struggle out that and then initially he will come out with the word van. So now he learned himself in a really quick method, because to
Right.
learn
Well, you're
the
teaching them
word.
to decode instead of memorize, and that is all
Exactly,
the
sir.
difference. Decoding is the key, not memorizing. You can't.
Exactly, sir.
Here's a little fun trivia you guys may or may not know. There's about 400,000 base words in English because it's partially German and partially French and partially the Romance languages, Italian and Spanish. English has a lot of base words. You cannot memorize 400,000 words, but you can memorize the patterns.
Yes, sir. And what we do after this is we'll do a post test also, where we can now know that how much the learner learned from the toolkit. So we say that it is a 30 hours process, where a learner, if he gives us a dedicated 30 hours of his time, we can make him literate in just 30 hours, despite of teaching him the same thing in the 3 years of process. So this was something more about our toolkit, sir.
I like it. It's really nice. Is that something that could be shared in the US?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely, John. It can be shared in the US, and we have a wonderful person working with us called Mary McCoolberry, and she is in Ohio. And
Okay.
she has looked at it. She was one of our detox presenters, and she is, absolutely, being able to help us also to look through beyond the next steps and so forth. So I would love to work with you, actually, John, and we can talk about that,
Oh,
how
for
we can do
sure.
that. Yes,
For
of
sure.
course, very much
And then
available in the
and
US.
then as I was mentioning at 10 May earlier, the Eduprotocols are all considered open education resources. So everything I shared you guys can use, because I love your system for pronunciation of vocabulary, but we have things that are built for reading comprehension that take it to a whole other level that you can adapt as well.
That sounds tremendous, and we're really looking forward to it. I think I'm jived by your presentation beyond anything I can imagine. Um, and you have been, teacher of the year for many years in a row. You're somebody who is creating successes for the children, and I
Right.
think your name should go down in history because of that. Because ultimately, it's all about making a difference,
Hmm.
and ground zero, that's the kids, and
Right.
they're jived by it.
Well, and
Brilliant.
what we're trying to do is, I know many teachers that sacrifice their time and money to do the job, but they're not necessarily getting the result they're looking for, and that is very frustrating. And so I think what people like about what we're sharing with them is your results can be far better. You can still love your job, but it doesn't have to be as hard as it used to be.
Right. Right. So I don't know. I didn't hear some of your beginning part, but basically, I will hear it now from you. I'll go back and review the video. What I want to say is that the issue of um, three or four things that I think you might have said, and they relate to what we're doing. For example, teaching all the eight parts of speech together.
Right. It's a
Uh,
whole ecosystem. You don't just
Whole
learn
ecosystem.
this and then learn that.
Yes, and so what you're doing is putting in an analytical context, and
Hmm.
you're organizing things in a graphic organizer,
Hmm.
so that it is always a memory. It
Right.
it helps the memory part, and
I've
you know that this.
actually I've actually had
Yes,
students tell me that 4 or 5 years after being in my class, they can close their eyes and remember prepositions over here.
yes,
And that
exactly.
and
To the
that's the
recorder.
locking in the long-term memory. Yeah.
Yes, it's brilliant. It's absolutely classic. I mean, just really, really tremendous. And the other idea of, one question approach, we have used that rather than
Hmm.
giving so many questions, so many examples, just
Hmm.
one, because
Just one.
that's enough. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's totally enough. So, to some extent, I don't know, but naturally we've been coming up with these things here a little bit. It'd be great to compare notes with you and do a lot more of the kinds of things you've done. And I'm glad that it's open source because it really will help our children.
Yeah.
Um, so,
Yeah, and
anyway,
that's and in fact,
go ahead.
if you guys if you wanted to do an Indian version, we have a licensing program for that for the book. So we could definitely talk about that as well.
I absolutely will love to do that of the meeting time. Um, I think that, and it's good for the educators who are listening in to know that these things will be available to you at home in India, and working with the schools at all levels because they're universal principles
Hmm.
that belong to every single person, and everyone deserves a right to do well. And if they can do it in a short time, then why not? If they can do it painlessly, then why not? Why do you have go through the pains? One
Yeah.
of the classic questions, though, will be about writing,
Hmm.
because though I can see that that also is working well. But can you specifically focus more on writing? Because we Indians are obsessed by writing,
Hmm. Oh,
and we understand lots of writing.
I got that covered. Okay, so
Okay.
how do we classically teach writing? We classically
Yeah.
teach writing by telling kids, giving them a prompt. Write about a pet you would like. Write about where your family went on vacation, right? We give kids a prompt and then they write 5 paragraphs. Sometimes we give them 3 or 4 days to write this essay, which really for the kids just makes it even more painful because now they have to come back and work on the essay they didn't want to do in the first place. We do one that's called the random emoji power paragraph. Do you guys have emoji in India? I bet you do.
We all do. Yes.
Do kids in India like emoji? I bet they do.
Oh, they love it. They love it. Yes,
So the
indeed, they do.
basically the rand and I was being a farcical there. Um, the idea of a random emoji power paragraph is we give the students 5 random emoji, and their job is to turn it into a story. 5 emoji, 5 sentences. I like to use a tool called Socrative, which is a free tool.
Yes.
Um, and so, what's neat about Socrative is at the end, you can hit start vote. All the students can read each other's little paragraphs. And the goal there is to teach them to pursue an idea, not to just jump around, but to develop a theme for that paragraph and pursue it until they're out of emoji. And I teach 6th grade is my normal grade. I've taught high school as well. I can easily get 6th graders to do 3 or 4 paragraphs in under half an hour. And they literally will say, can we do one more? And so what I'm doing is, instead of giving kids 5 paragraphs that I then have to take home and read that night and grade, and then the students don't look at the feedback anyways, do they? They leave the paper on the ground or they shove it in their backpack. With random emoji, the feedback's in real time and it's whole class. So everybody can see what the other ones wrote, and they can say things like, "Oh my God, Tanmay, your story was so hilarious." They're seeing them, which brings in the engagement. And I'm a big fan of this. If we can teach students to write really good paragraphs, the really good essays will automatically follow. But what we tend to do in teaching is we teach only essays to kids who are not very good at paragraphs. And it's backwards. And in the US, we have kids that write like this: "Hi, my name is John. I'm going to write you a story about firstly, secondly, thirdly, I hope you like my essay. The end." And that's not how people write. But that's what we're teaching them. And no wonder they don't like it, because that's not what they see on social media. They definitely don't see paragraphs like that on social media.
Brilliant. I think, it's just catching them where they can excel and showing them always the bright side of life, showing them
Mm-hmm.
always that the glass is half full. They
Yep.
know they can only construct themselves, they learn from each other, they enjoy the process, and the process is the key thing here. They enjoy from each other and learning from each other. The
Yep.
appreciation from each other is also very good feedback for them.
All the
I think
research shows
psychology.
that real-time feedback from your peers and your professor, nothing grows students better than real-time interaction and feedback and iteration. Nothing.
Yeah, it's a zero point 0.7 effect size in John Hattie's
Yep.
list of 52 influencers.
It's a big number.
It's a big number. Zero point 0.7 would mean that a child in grade, performing at grade D, would
Mm-hmm.
perform at grade A by the end of the year.
And I've
So,
had students in my class do that. I've had on
hmm,
our standardized tests, I had one student this year that went from the first percentile, which is the worst possible, to the 54th percentile,
it's tremendous. Wow.
which is almost unheard of in the US, because what they do is they start tracking kids. And then if you're not doing well, they give you easier work to do and easier work to do. And the kids are not impressed. In fact, they're insulted. And so they work less, and then their scores don't come up. And it's a vicious circle.
I think you should be guiding education policy worldwide.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, the truth's out there. All we have to do is choose to listen to it. And again, I know Sugata Mitra, not everybody everywhere agrees with everything he says, but when he talks about the idea that students don't need me to teach them every single thing, students need me to teach them a process of learning, not a string of facts. He's 100% right there, and that ties in with Hattie and Marzano.
Marzano, right, correct. Yeah. And so, what's your view about, again, another thing very high on Hattie implied sort of like teacher collective efficacy, and he talks, or the research meta analysis is also conclusive on things like what might be called the Pygmalion Effect, also that when you expect more, you get more.
Yeah. Well, in my
So,
class, I call that Stockholm syndrome. Uh,
oh, okay. Okay.
it's like when you're trapped with your captor and you start believing everything. I think there is something to that. I think and again, using a grandmother as an example, my grandmother believes I'm good and I'm smart and I'm going to be successful. And therefore, how many people do you know are better people because of their grandmothers? Why can't the teacher play a similar role? The key on teaching, though, is I've got to blend in some actual skills with the belief, right? It's not okay to just say, well, you guys are smart, and then not do any work. But I believe a lot that it's important that we believe in what students are. I think the other term I've heard there is strengths-based teaching. I have a student this year who came in. He was not a strong reader or writer, but guess what, doctor? It turns out he's really good at making slides. He makes really pretty, he understands graphics, he understands fonts. And what I noticed was the more chances he got to show the kids about his slides and his Minecraft skills, his reading started going up too. And I think it's because he esteemed the class. It wasn't a place where he was suppressed and hidden. It was a place where all of his skills were now being shared, and I think that's a big part of it. I think there's definitely some Pygmalion effect going on, as opposed to a class that says next year's going to be horrible because it's so much harder, and you're never going to make it in university, and you guys are all lazy, so I'm keeping you in at recess. How does that work out?
Ooh, nasty, totally nasty. It's just unbelievable that teachers wouldn't do that. Actually, children are more empathetic. Is that your observation also? I think they're
Yeah.
more kind to each other than the teacher are necessarily to the children.
I think the kids are far more kind to each other. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah, so we should unleash that power, because actually that's where a lot of nonsense is happening when teachers are not talking the right lingo, not directly, indirectly communicating. You're not good enough, and I think that's spoiling lives like anything. And if anything, teachers do nothing else except just endorse the children positively. I
Yeah.
should think that there'll be major gains in terms of students coming out successful.
Well, and we have so many ways to punish kids. We can take time away, we can bench them, we can detention, we can have them copy. What if we, and in the US this is called PBIS, but the idea is let's get to the root of the behavior. In fact, here's one more thing I think you'll like. In my classroom, I only have one rule. The students have one rule, and the rule is to do the right thing at the right time. That's the rule. And sometimes the rules change because it's not the right time. Sometimes it's a great time to stand on your chair. Other times it's not. And helping students understand those choices is critical to their future success. That's executive function. But if you have a rule that prevents them from doing anything, and I don't know about you, but I sense a bit of scallywag in there. If a teacher makes 31 rules, I will be figuring out why they should have 32 rules. Like if there's not a rule for it, I'm going to try it. And then the teacher's angry because they feel like the student's manipulating him. But if the rule is to do the right thing at the right time, and then what I teach the kids is, if you're uncertain, just ask me before you do the thing. Like, don't just get up and go get a drink of water, but if you ask me first, I'll probably say yes. So that piece is critical as well. And that's why I like to talk about pedagogy over curriculum, because pedagogy is the whole approach to the teaching and learning. It's not just the content, and it's not just the lesson plan. It's how you approach the whole thing.
I totally agree. But where is your starting point? Which anchor point are you using to define your worldview about teaching? I think your view on the belief system of the teacher, obviously, that's where everything happens. If the teacher
Right.
believes the only way to discipline children is to spank them, tell them
That's all
off,
they do. Yeah.
and look
Um,
angrily at them.
well, teaching was a third career for me. I worked in contracting and construction, and then I worked in technology. And then my bachelor's degree is actually in advertising. So when I started teaching, the last thing I wanted to do was be a regular teacher based on my experience as a student with a low B average. And so then I was inspired. There's three really what I would consider seminal articles that I would recommend for young teachers. One is, and you can look this up, 17 Reasons Football is Better Than High School. And that's actually from the University of Michigan. A gentleman spent a whole year studying why high school kids work so hard for sports and won't do anything in class. My second favorite one is going to be a book called Dumbing Us Down by John Taylor Gatto. And he wrote that in 1992 or 3 as the New York State Teacher of the Year. And he really talks about how school was built to be a mind control experiment by the British to control the colonies and keep the workers under control. And some of the things that we do in school are the offshoot and the legacy of that. And then the third thing I would share with people, and this is on Amazon Prime, a film called Most Likely to Succeed, which also echoes a lot of that work that Gatto talks about. And so once you see those things, once you see yourself doing those things, it's very easy to start separating. And so I stepped away from textbooks in about 1999, and I decided to really learn how to teach that process of reading and writing and not be bound to any one program or brand, and that those were the differences for me over the long run.
Fabulous. So over to Tanmay, because we are running into time shortages. Um, I think I could hear you many days straight, no doubt.
Well, right back at you. I love what you guys are doing because the what I saw, that little snippet, is a rare thing in the United States, and I'm going to be happy to share that with my friends.
Yes, sir, and we too learned a lot things from you and your presentation and the discussion between you and Dr. Sunita Gandhi. It was a great discussion, and saying anything after that would be of no use because this discussion was very apt and useful for the viewers, I think. And so, with this, we move to the end of the session of Detox. To learn more about Global Dream 30 Hours Foundational Literacy and Numeracy Approach, please do visit www.globaldream.guru, and you can also WhatsApp us on 740-840-6000. With this, I would like to thank Mr. John Coripo for coming on to our session and telling us such wonderful things and such an insightful presentation. And with this, I would also like to thank Dr. Sunita Gandhi for participating in this session as the discussant and giving the session some new dimensions. Thank you to both of you. Thank you so much, John sir, for accepting the invitation and coming on to the detox session.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much and have a nice day.